My name's Jim Downs, and I'm a field specialist in forestry for Ohio State University Extension. And today, I am back out on my tree farm in Rockbridge, Ohio, to introduce an important non-native invasive plant, which is autumn olive. Autumn olive natively grows in Asia, but it was originally brought over here to the United States for ornamental reasons in the 1830s. This was a plant that was commonly recommended to be planted for wildlife and wildlife habitat, as well as on reclamation grounds. Particularly here in eastern Ohio, this was a plant that was commonly planted on reclaimed coal mine land. The identifying features of autumn olive are the leaves are simple, usually about somewhere between 1.5 to 3 inches in length and about a 1/2 inch wide. The top part of the leaves tend to be a darker green. Tops of those leaves will contain small silver speckles. The underside of the leaf is probably the easiest thing to identify this plant. And the underside of the leaves are very silver in nature and essentially covered in small silver speckles. If you look at the twigs, even the twigs are very speckled, covered in those silver speckles. And the buds, when they're produced in the late summer to fall, they will be made up of 4 segments or 4 sections, and those will be covered in speckles as well. Occasionally on the finer parts of the twig, you will see thorns or thorn-like features or sharpened spur shoots. However, it's not something that you will see all the time on autumn olive. The form of autumn olive is a shrub, so it's going to grow as multiple stems coming up from the ground, can reach heights of somewhere around 20 feet, and the diameter of this, at least if you measure the diameter of the crown and the branches, can sometimes be upwards of 20 foot in diameter. A lot of times when we see it growing in the woods, you'll see it growing as more of a single stem or a few multiple stems coming up out of the ground, and it won't reach that exceptionally large size. However, when it's grown in open areas, it will reach those very large sizes, as it does love growing in the sunlight. One of the first areas that autumn olive will typically exploit is the edges of forest areas and field areas. That's a very common place to see this growing. And one of the things that it will do is, as time goes on, because it will reach out and grow towards the sunlight, it will end up stretching out into the fields and potentially shrinking the size of your field areas. As time goes on, it will spread into woodland areas, and there are woodlands that can be completely overrun or almost completely overtaken with autumn olive. The fruit of autumn olive is a berry-like fruit. It's red and be about 1/4 inch in diameter and will actually contain silver speckles on it. These fruits are the equivalent of junk food for wildlife, even though they are readily consumed by songbirds. They do not contain the amount of proteins or fats that many of our native fruits or native berries contain, and therefore are the equivalent of a unhealthy junk food. Mature autumn olives can produce upwards of 200,000 fruits per year. And as I mentioned, these fruits are readily spread by songbirds. The fruit that autumn olive produces is a juicy and somewhat sweet to sour berry that is edible for people. And actually it can be turned into jellies and jams. The flowers of autumn olive are either a white or yellowish color. Actually, they flower in the beginning or the early part of May, and they will be about a 1/2 inch in length and 1/4 inch in diameter when they're open. They are very fragrant. It is quite possible to smell autumn olive when it is pollinating from a great distance because of the noticeable fragrance that it produces. The bark of autumn olive will be smooth gray when it's smaller in diameter, and through time, it will begin to split and become somewhat flaky. One of the interesting features to autumn olive is that this plant has the ability to fix nitrogen in the soil. So it's able to pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere, which our atmosphere is around 78% nitrogen, and it's able to fix nitrogen in the soil thanks to a symbiotic relationship with a bacteria. The bacteria will form nodules in the root system, and that will create nitrogen or bind nitrogen in the soil in a manner that is actually usable to other plants. So the bacteria produces the nitrogen, and in turn the bacteria receives sugars from the autumn olive. So this plant is often misidentified in Ohio as Russian olive. Now we do have Russian olive in the state of Ohio, but it is somewhat rare, with autumn olive being located in every county within the state, and actually exists in every state east of the Mississippi and a handful of states in the western part of the United States as well. Russian olive is found in a handful of counties in Ohio, but not nearly as common as autumn olive. So if you're interested in controlling autumn olive on your own property, you might want to check out the Ohio State University Extension's fact sheet on autumn olive. Hand pulling of autumn olive is possible on just relatively small seedling sized autumn olives. As you get into very large size autumn olives, such as those that may be a foot in height, they end up being very difficult to pull out of the ground and get the entirety of the root system, and then therefore that root system will be able to resprout. In order to successfully control autumn olive, some type of herbicide will likely be needed. Unfortunately, one of the more common herbicides that is used in Ohio, at least in our woodlands, is glyphosate, and that particular chemical will only partially control autumn olive, and therefore is generally not recommended as a herbicide for autumn olive. With that, thank you for watching, and have a great day.